Have you ever considered the problems that guns pose for writers? Think of it through the lens of a magic system, a small tool that anyone can use with little to no skill or training that's capable of killing a primary character at any point in the story. It's such a problem that so often in anime and storytelling, guns are nerfed, made to be less deadly and dangerous. Not only is this common, it's the standard. But as a trope becomes more common, there's actually space that's created for someone to come along and subvert it. Oh, and what if that subversion ended up offering so much more than just playing with audiences' expectations? My name is Pei, and today we're talking about when anime finally made guns scary. There's a long history of nerfing guns in media, not just anime. There's the famous trope of henchmen who can't aim, the most obvious example being stormtroopers, or also from Star Wars, giving Jedi lightsabers that can deflect bullets away from them. But there's also that trope of grabbing a bullet out of the air, or giving a hero powers that nullify any danger guns carry. In any story built around action, unless they're in the hands of a hero, guns are rarely effective. But even when guns are deadly, they never seem to hit protagonists in vital places. That being said, there's still no shortage of guns in anime. But what about a show where fear of guns is a central plot point? An anime with so much hype around its release that it seemed impossible that it would ever live up to those expectations. Until it did. We're coming up on 2 years since Chainsaw Man first started airing, and if you weren't around for its release, you probably don't understand how much hype surrounded this show. There were lots of contributing factors, like the popularity and die-hard fans of the manga, or that Studio Mappa had created a hell of a reputation for itself by late 2020. Surely that held up. Something I've argued multiple times in my previous videos is that expectations are as much a curse as they are a blessing. So when I sat down to watch this show for the first time, I don't know how it could ever live up to the hype. And for me, for the first 7 episodes, it didn't. It was good, not great. And yes, a huge portion of that was probably these unreasonable expectations I carried into watching the show for the first time. And then episode 8 happened, and it went from being a good show to an outstanding one. Today's video is brought to you by me. I'm surprised at how many people are supporting this channel on Patreon. It's pretty cool. Someday soon, I'll replace this with actual ads that'll be way more profitable, but in the meantime, if you want to support the series or the channel and have disposable income, consider going to my Patreon. There's a link in the description below. It's not uncommon for stories to reach a tipping point. In writing, there's something that's often pointed to called the inciting incident. Discussion around inciting incidents tends to imply that there can only be one that starts the story. But I think there can be many different inciting incidents that happen across a story. Some can function as red herrings, while others are setting up bigger, more interesting inciting incidents. This all just depends on how often a story evolves and shifts tone. This comes back to a storytelling structure that I learned from Brandon Sanderson called bracketed ideas. That plot and character arcs are not singular, but rather an amalgamated network of different ideas that are introduced throughout the story. Each time an individual part is introduced, that's the opening of a bracket, and when it's resolved, that's the closing. Sanderson argues that any finale is built around the closing of many different brackets, and potentially the opening of new ones. Let's say you were creating a world where there were monsters called devils that gained power based off of the negative emotions surrounding them in the world, like fear, for example. If a devil is at any point killed, that's a reset, before they slowly start to garner power again. Things that cause more fear would therefore be more powerful, especially if they've gone a long time without being killed. There would be some industry surrounding the protection from devils, maybe hunters for example. And what if devils were used by hunters or the military? What if people could strike deals with devils, gaining access to some of their power for a trade-off? These are all open brackets that are introduced at the beginning of Chainsaw Man. And while some will close, others will create new questions, playing into the story's first and then second major inciting incidents. Because all of these brackets contribute not only to the plot and character arcs, but also the tone of the story. Chainsaw Man's first inciting incident is kind of exactly what you'd expect from a shonen, except with a much darker tone. Denji, the main character, is living a brutal life, and before he even gets a chance to change it, he gets betrayed by an already shitty group of people. Now, before things come to an end for him, he's actually saved by his companion, a demon dog named Punchita, otherwise known as the newly reset Chainsaw Devil. Denji, who's now no longer really a human, is taken in by the Devil Hunter Association, It's a standard start to a shonen with a bit of a darker twist. And while there are some outstanding plot choices and themes in the first 7 episodes, the second inciting incident is really where my perception of the story shifted. In many ways, Chainsaw Man starts as a hyper-typical shonen. There are normal amounts of twists and turns that are engaging, with great scenes and little mini arcs that set up the show well. By the 6th or 7th episode, it starts to really feel like you know what's coming next, but that's when they get you. You see, the story has a really interesting dynamic surrounding antagonists. The most prevalent, especially in the beginning, is the Gun Devil, a terribly dangerous monster that had impact on millions of people's lives. So given the way we understand anime to generally approach guns, especially in battle shonen, and the rules that Chainsaw Man has introduced in its magic system, there's gonna be some contrast. If this story were really to hit, guns should be scary, but how they're gonna navigate that seems tricky until episode 8. Important context for the second inciting incident is that in the world of Chainsaw Man, being a devil hunter is an incredibly dangerous profession, especially in the public sector. So after we get a couple arcs and interesting dynamics, eventually we get all of our characters in this ensemble cast to sit down for a dinner. And just as you're starting to get to know a lot of these characters, we get arguably the most engaging escalation I've seen in modern shonen, and it's all built around just how terrifying guns can be. Spoiler warnings for episode 8 and 9 of Chainsaw Man. These specific episodes of Chainsaw Man are a masterclass in viewer experience, sound design, directing, and writing, and it's all built around a synchronized attack of the Tokyo-based Devil Hunters Association. There's all these important characters that are introduced across the first 7 episodes of Chainsaw Man. And at the forefront of these important characters is Makima, a powerful member of the Devil Hunters Association that's responsible for Denji. And in the first 7 episodes, she's set up in a lot of really interesting ways, which makes it even more shocking when she gets shot. There's this fantastic scene leading up to this tipping point where the metaphorical roller coaster ride starts. There's this uncanny moment where 4 characters dip their head in unison. Then it's matched with expert sound design and pacing. There are ruffling of bags and zippers, and then just off screen, a gun. Before you know it, this character that's been set up the entire season is dead. And it's not just her. Suddenly, there's an organized attack on all the characters we've been introduced to. It's terrifying and fantastically written. And it's all built around making guns scary, which is so subversive. But also that's kind of crazy when you think about it, because the subversion is just based off of the opposite of what's actually intuitive, because it poses a problem for writers. It shouldn't feel subversive to make guns dangerous. Guns are dangerous. That's a standard. But that's the thing. When it comes to watching battle shonens, people may not even realize that they don't expect guns to be dangerous. It's like this implicit understanding. But the really interesting thing about these 2 episodes is while the premise is fascinating, it's only the first part of a 1-2 punch. Because Chainsaw Man doesn't only have one antagonist. Making guns scary was subversive and fantastic, but what makes these 2 episodes work so well is that they make someone else scarier. Remember when I talked about how they had set up Makima so much up until this point? Well, it turns out that's for good reason. Makima has been this weird balance of caring and manipulative, providing the protagonist Denji with some direction and kindness. But from the very start, there's this uncanny underlying tone that's implied that feels incredibly disconcerting. So after this huge crescendo and twist, suddenly Makima stands up. For some reason that isn't explained in the anime yet, she can't die. And that's just the start of the bullshit that is her character. I mean, literally, a character calls her abilities bullshit. Because as scary as this organization is in these 2 episodes, what's even scarier is the way Makima responds. Chainsaw Man did something I didn't think was possible, which is completely blow me away despite being one of the most overhyped anime releases ever. To live up to those expectations is an incredibly difficult challenge. And while the premise of this video is absolutely built around the subversion of expectation with guns in media, what made Chainsaw Man so impressive is that it wasn't just 1, but 2 episodes with fantastic execution. This subversion was just the first part of a 1-2 punch. A set of episodes so impressive that I decided to revisit them 2 years later. Thank you. I'll see you next week.